The autumn wind had long since died by the time Gerard found himself wandering the old road outside town, the one that curved past the tree line and sloped gently toward the forgotten quarters of the valley. Leaves crunched beneath his worn shoes, brittle and faded, like the pages of a memory too old to revisit but too loud to forget. He hadn't meant to come this way. Perhaps it was the fog of grief that clouded his better sense, or the weight in his coat pocket, the pocket knife, old and worn, dulled from time and use. Brett's knife, the one he'd carried since Boy Scouts, since the days when tents and smoke-scented sleeping bags had made the world feel safe and infinite. Now that weight pulled more than cloth. It dragged his soul. Brett was gone. No one had said it outright, of course. The obituary spoke in vague, sterile terms. Unexpected, a tragedy, taken too soon. But Gerard knew, had known. You could hear it in the way people didn't say things, in the careful way they offered condolences while avoiding his eyes. He had walked for hours, maybe longer, and now, without willing it, he was standing before the house. The house. It loomed at the end of the curve like something the forest had tried to forget. A Victorian behemoth with sagging eaves, half swallowed in ivy and rot. And yet, it seemed taller now, broader. The Widow's Watch at its peak glinted faintly in the moonlight, like a lighthouse for the damned. Windows stared like cataracted eyes, and the door was ajar. Gerard froze. His breath plumed before him, though the night wasn't cold enough for frost. The house had always been a curiosity as children, a whispered challenge among the neighborhood boys. He and Brett had once dared each other to run up and touch the door. It had been a joke, a rite of passage. He still remembered the laughter, the electric thrill of fear and pride. Now the sight filled him with something colder. The porch boards creaked beneath his tentative steps. Suddenly a flock of birds exploded from the tree overhead with a violence that made him flinch. Somewhere beneath their retreating cries, the house seemed to shiver in place. When he had started walking up the brick front path, he couldn't say. Up close, the house was wrong in a new way. Yes, the siding was cracked and peeling, but some parts looked restored. Here, a stretch of wall gleamed with fresh paint. There, a window pane was curiously unbroken. Even the doorknob gleamed faintly, as if freshly polished. He reached for it and paused. The threshold exhaled a breath he couldn't feel but somehow heard. His hand closed around the handle. A pressure, an invitation, or a warning. He stepped inside. The air was different here. Heavy, not musty, more like sinking into the depths of an abandoned well where no sound or light could reach. The door closed softly behind him, though no wind stirred. And for the briefest second, Gerard thought he felt the house exhale again, this time with satisfaction. The house's darkened foyer blurred at the edges of Gerard's vision, as though the world itself were unspooling. For a moment he stood frozen, the dim outlines of ruined furniture and peeling wallpaper flickering like the last images of a dying film reel. Then, without warning, the decay melted away. The sharp, acrid scent of mildew faded into the warm, sweet aroma of birthday cake and wax candles. The air softened. Gerard found himself standing in the living room of his childhood home, washed in the amber light of late afternoon. Balloons sagged on curling ribbons from the ceiling. A hand-drawn banner, slightly askew, read, "Happy 6th Birthday, Gerard," in bright, clumsy letters. Presents, few and modest, sat unopened on a table pushed against the wall, and he saw himself. A small boy, sitting on the floor, a crumpled paper party hat hanging from his head, sniffling softly. The room was empty, save for him. Empty chairs, empty plates, an empty house humming with a silence far heavier than loneliness. The doorbell rang. The small Gerard looked up, eyes red and wet, hope flickering and dying again in a heartbeat. But then the door opened, and through it stepped a boy his age, clutching a package wrapped in newspaper. Brett. A wide, awkward grin spread across the newcomer's face. "Heard there was a party. Hope you don't mind just me," he said, the words trembling with shy warmth. The memory should have filled Gerard with relief, with a bittersweet joy, and it did. But something was wrong. Brett's figure, though familiar, refused to settle into focus. His features blurred at the edges, twitching as if caught behind an oily glass. His voice, too, held a strange delay, as though the sound traveled from far underwater. Still, the memory played out. The two boys tore into the meager pile of presents, laughing. They battled on an ancient video game console, shouting taunts and high-fiving. That afternoon, a friendship was forged that would anchor Gerard's life for decades to come. Yet even as he watched, Gerard felt a tremor of unease growing in his chest. Brett's movements grew odder, his head tilting at wrong angles, his laughter stretching too long into the quiet. And then, faint but undeniable, the walls of the living room breathed. The wallpaper bubbled outward, then sagged. The air grew dense again, pressing against Gerard's skin like wet cloth. The scent of cake soured, curdling into the reek of mold and dust. Brett, still grinning that strange frozen grin, turned toward him. The boy's face blurred into a waxy smudge, and for a moment, Gerard saw something else within the small form, something vast and ancient, coiling behind the innocent facade like a patient predator. The illusion collapsed. The balloons burst into dust. The party banner disintegrated. The couch, the TV, the bright sunlight, all peeled away in curling strips, revealing the rotted carcass of the Victorian house once more. Gerard stood alone in the gutted living room, swaying on his feet. A deep exhaustion clung to his bones, and the distant sound of something stirring beneath the floorboards sent a new, more intimate terror crawling up his spine. Somewhere, deep within the house, or deep within himself, something had awakened. The next doorway stood crooked on its hinges, set into the far wall like a wound. Gerard, against his better judgment, crossed the ruined living room and stepped through. He emerged into the scent of pine smoke and damp earth. The forest surrounded him. Distant laughter echoed through the trees, shrill and half-remembered. It was night now, and the flickering light of a dying campfire cast long shadows over a half-circle of tents. Several years had passed. He was 13 again. The firelight caught movement to the right. A man stepped into view, a tall figure in Scoutmaster uniform, arms folded tightly across his chest. The man's face was just slightly wrong, familiar but distorted, like a photo badly reprinted. His feet hovered slightly above the pine-needled ground. Gerard knew what was coming. "You think this is funny?" the figure asked. The voice was deep, resonant, and hollow. Gerard said nothing. The guilt came flooding back as though the memory had never faded. He wanted to look cool, wanted to belong, so he'd put peanut butter under Brett's tent before lights out. When the raccoons dug under his bedroll in the middle of the night, Brett ran out screaming and crying, utterly crushed to hear the laughter from all around him. Just a joke, Gerard had said, but Brett wasn't laughing. The next morning he had asked to go home early, silent tears staining his cheeks as the van drove away. The puppet scoutmaster moved closer. You humiliated your only friend. What kind of person does that? Gerard flinched. The man's voice echoed strangely, overlapping itself in nauseating waves. Then the figure extended something. Wrapped in a faded red handkerchief was a pocket knife. He left it behind. The man said, "You might want to use this as a peace offering." Gerard reached out and took it. As his fingers closed around the handle, the trees began to flicker like strobe lights. The tents bent inward. The fire sputtered in reverse. And then he was alone again, in the Victorian ruin. The knife was still in his hand. He stared at it, breathing hard. His knees trembled beneath him. His stomach turned. Each step forward left him emptier than the last. And deeper in the house, something laughed without making a sound. The staircase that rose from the center of the room twisted like a spine. Gerard climbed slowly, one hand trailing along the warped banister, the other tightening around the pocket knife. His legs moved without will, driven forward not by courage, but shame. At the top, the air shimmered. The steps beneath him became linoleum. The dim light changed to sterile fluorescence. A familiar door loomed ahead, faded numbers, a dent near the handle. And taped to the wood, a nameplate scrawled in Brett's old handwriting. College dorms, cheap and unwelcoming, a place his memory rarely chose to revisit unless it had to. Gerard knew this room. He reached into his jeans pocket and found a key already in his hand. The door creaked open. A puff of acrid smoke drifted out. Burnt plastic, bitter chemical fumes. The blinds were drawn. Inside, Brett was slouched in a desk chair, pipe in hand, his eyes red-rimmed and distant. He didn't look up. Gerard stepped in slowly, heart pounding. "You said you were done," he whispered. "You swore to me." Brett turned, sluggish and smiling with a slack jaw. "You weren't supposed to be back till tomorrow," he slurred. The words sent fire down Gerard's spine. Rage coiled in his gut, familiar and dangerous. How many times? How many second chances? His voice cracked, loud and raw now. The memory, once static, twitched. Brett's limbs jerked like something tugged them from above. His face blurred slightly, then reset. His mouth moved, but the words came a heartbeat later. "It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal." This counterfeit Brett was broken in more ways than he should be. His eyes blinked out of sync. Fingers twitched with mindless repetition. The air around him pulsed like a stretched membrane. Gerard took a step back, suddenly aware of the edges of the room glitching, the ceiling warping like heat haze. "This isn't real," he muttered. Brett stood or was lifted to his feet. His joints cracked, head lolling as if the string puller above had grown clumsy. "You abandoned me," Brett's mouth said, but it was the house's voice now, deep, layered, echoing with static. Gerard turned to run. The door had disappeared. The walls flexed. He stumbled forward, and the world shifted violently. Gone was the dorm. Gone was the puppet. Gerard now stood outside, the wind howling in his ears. He was on the widow's watch. The tower's edge loomed inches from his toes. Below, the earth waited far, far away. He teetered, cold, so cold. The storm-dark sky above rippled like ink. Gerard staggered back from the ledge, gasping, heart hammering. Something had pushed him, or lured him. He was still holding the knife. His fingers hurt from how tightly he'd gripped it. The dorm, Brett. That voice, the accusations, all gone. But the rage still roiled in his veins, and beneath it, fear. The wind on the tower howled eerily. Gerard turned from the ledge, shaking, and found the staircase again, spiraling downward into gloom. He descended in a daze, only each step a battle against the numbness overtaking his limbs. At the bottom, a hallway stretched out before him, longer than it should have been. The walls curved subtly inward, pulsing with a breath he could almost feel. Faint shapes crawled just beyond the corners of vision. He moved forward, sluggishly. A door to his left creaked open, a sliver. From the darkness within, a hand shot out, a puppet's hand, stitched and pale, yanking him violently through. The hallway vanished. Gerard stood in a drab waiting room. Magazines on the table were warped and water-damaged. The light above flickered. Gray Pine's Wellness Center, the wall red. Across the room, Brett entered. Older now, gaunt, hollow-cheeked. He didn't look at Gerard. He crossed the room with a bowed head and disappeared through another door. No words. He would spend the last 6 months of his life in this white-walled prison. Gerard reached out but couldn't speak. He was a ghost in this place. He turned, and the room melted. He was in an old parlor. Victorian wallpaper rotted beneath mold. A velvet chair sagged under its own dust. And from the closet door, another figure slid out. A grotesque marionette, faceless, limbs dragging behind like wet rope. Gerard stumbled back. His vision flashed. Pale green walls, machines beeping, IVs dripping. Brett unconscious. A figure at his bedside in a white coat. The doctor turns, but it isn't a doctor. Its face drooped like wax left too near a flame. Its eyes were painted on. The mouth opened in a grotesque yawn. "This is your fault," it said. The voice came from everywhere at once. "You were supposed to protect him. You let him fail." Gerard backed away, colliding again with the parlor's reality. The puppet from the closet now glided toward him, arms wide. He bolted through a crooked doorway into a grand entryway, the great staircase leading down to the front door. He ran, blind with panic. A hand grabbed him from behind. Gerard spun and struck out with the knife. The figure collapsed, not human, not even fully solid. The puppet's skin sloughed off, revealing a thick, glistening tentacle that writhed as it retracted into a hole in the floorboards, slick with bubbling black rot. He fell the last few steps, hitting the ground hard. The foyer. He was back, but something had changed. The house was awake, and it was hungry. He lay splayed across the floor like a broken doll, chest heaving, vision spotted with gray. Every inch of him trembled. His limbs felt like lead. The front door loomed just yards away. He could see outside. Safety. He began to crawl. Every muscle cried out as he dragged himself forward. Splinters bit into his palms. The floor groaned beneath him, not from his weight, but from the strain of something beneath it, shifting, stretching, coiling. A wet snap. A tentacle shot from a floor crack behind him and wrapped around his ankle. Gerard screamed, a raw, primal sound, and twisted round. He fumbled for the knife. Steel met flesh. Not flesh. Something colder, denser. The blade pierced the tentacle's side, and dark ichor sprayed across the floor. The house shuddered. A deep, guttural moan rippled through the walls, as though the structure itself were in agony. The windows bowed inward, the paint blistered. The floor beneath him pulsed like a living thing. He staggered to his feet. Run. He bolted, pain forgotten. But as he neared the door, they came. From every crack, from every doorway, from beneath furniture and out of broken vents, they poured. Dozens of puppet figures, each a warped image of Brett at a different age. The boy with the birthday hat, the scout with trembling hands, the college addict, the husk in the hospital bed. Each one wrong. eyes too wide, mouths too large, joints bending where they shouldn't. They swarmed him, hands grabbed his arms, fingers like dull joints clawed his shoulders. They pulled him to the floor, dragging him backward, as 1,000 mouths began to chant, "You should have seen. You should have saved me. You let me die." He thrashed, but it was like wrestling water. "You killed me," the words echoed from every wall, every ceiling beam, every eye socket of the puppets. He whimpered back, "I'm sorry. I tried." But the puppets only laughed, a deep guttural gurgling laugh. Tentacles slithered across his chest, around his waist, up his neck. His tears mixed with grime as he was dragged across the floor toward the basement door. Now wide open, it yawned like a maw. No stairs, just an endless blackness. A throat lined with roots and teeth. Gerard clawed at the floorboards, fingernails splitting, skin tearing. "Please," he sobbed. "I'm sorry, please." The last of his breath fled as the tentacles jerked, pulling him downward in a single violent motion. The door slammed shut behind him with a force that echoed through the beams and into the bones of the house. And then, silence. No wind stirred the dying leaves, no birds cried from the withered trees. The world itself seemed to hold its breath, listening. Then, from deep within the bones of the house, a low hum began to rise. It vibrated through the floorboards, the beams, the very nails driven into the ancient wood. A sound like a great beast sighing in satisfaction. Outside, the flaking paint on the porch brightened, smoothing over cracks like skin healing after a long scab. Shattered window panes reformed from oozing clear liquid, glinting in the gray light. The ivy strangling the walls pulled back slightly, revealing siding that looked almost new. And then, on the western side of the house, where once there had been only rotted boards, the wall shuddered. With a wet tearing sound, the wood split open, oozing sap and black resin. A new door formed, a perfect match to the rest of the house's facade, though no architect had ever designed it. Behind that door, a new room blossomed from the darkness. Inside, dusty furniture arranged itself. A crooked couch, a broken television, the sagging outlines of a long-forgotten birthday party. A faint, mocking scent of wax candles and cake drifted through the crack under the door. The hum died away, leaving only the sound of old wood settling. The house grew still again. Deep beneath the floorboards, where writhing roots coiled around countless bones, something vast and patient stirred once more, waiting for its next meal to wander past.